Undercover boss buys coffee, freezes when barista says she hasn't eaten since yesterday. That morning was colder than usual. A thin mist covered the large glass windows of the cafe, making the warm yellow lights inside feel even more subdued. On a small street on the outskirts of the city, a woman stepped into New Dawn Cafe, a suburban branch, long marked as stable in every internal report. She didn't carry the appearance of a CEO. A faded gray coat, a wool hat pulled low over her head, a simple scarf, all of it made her look like just another regular customer seeking a bit of warmth on a chilly morning. No one recognized Ava Bennett, 50 years old founder of the New Dawn Cafe chain, which started 2 decades ago as a small coffee cart in the city center square. She chose a seat by the window and ordered a simple breakfast: black coffee, a boiled egg, and a slice of toast. But she didn't come to eat. After years buried in revenue reports, board meetings, and expansion strategies, Ava had begun to feel she had lost the most important thing: the sense of being truly connected to reality. To see and hear the heartbeat behind the brand she had once believed in with all her heart. If you want to last, start by respecting the ones who quietly keep the doors open every day. This morning she returned not as a CEO, but as a quiet guest, hoping to find out if that philosophy of respecting every person still lived in the cups of coffee served with hurried smiles in the cold, or if now it was merely a slogan printed on marketing banners. And she didn't know in just a few minutes a whisper from a young waitress would make her stop mid-bite and begin to reevaluate the entire system she had built with her own hands. Lana approached the table with a soft smile, carefully setting down the coffee and toast with egg. The young woman had a petite figure, hair tied hastily behind her head, and an apron whose edges were frayed but still freshly laundered. There was something in her eyes, a weariness well hidden beneath a layer of professional calm. Ava smiled politely. "Up early and already on your feet. You must be earning quite a bit in tips, huh?" The question was posed in a light tone, like a regular striking up small talk with a server. But when Lana paused and looked up, the answer didn't come immediately. She hesitated, then looked down at the edge of the plate. "Actually, I haven't eaten since the day before yesterday." The words slipped out, almost like a long-held confession finally released. "I've been saving money. Each morning I just drink water. I wait until after my shift to decide." Ava tightened her grip around the cup. The coffee was still hot, but her heart had turned cold. It wasn't just an answer. It was the truth hitting the heart of someone who had once sworn New Dawn Cafe would never let a worker go hungry because of their job. A system that was built to honor kindness and hard work now letting a girl choose between a meal and quietly fading into invisibility. Ava watched Lana walk back to the counter. Her frame looked even thinner than her apron suggested. And in that very moment, every reason for this morning's visit became clearer than ever. It wasn't about checking reports. It wasn't about reviewing performance. It was about finding what had been lost amidst beautiful but hollow numbers. Injustice doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just stands quietly behind the counter, wearing someone else's name. Ava didn't leave after breakfast. She ordered another coffee, not out of craving, but for time. A valid enough reason to stay and silently observe. From the corner table near the window, she watched Lana. The girl didn't stop moving for a single second. She was the first to greet guests when the doorbell chimed softly. She was the one who wiped the last table after the last guest had left. Still the one carrying trays, pouring water, serving dishes with an unforced dedication. And every time a customer paid by card and left a small tip on the receipt, the POS screen showed just one name: Kyle M. Kyle, the tall male staffer in a white shirt, wearing earbuds, hadn't left the counter all morning. He hadn't served, hadn't stepped out from the register. Yet he was the one appearing in every transaction. Table 2, 3.50 tip, Kyle M. 8.5 soar tip, Kyle M. O table 3, 2.5 tip, Kyle M. Ava felt a sharp pain in her chest, not because of the numbers, but because of the deliberate absence of the real people pouring their energy into each day. Near the end of the morning shift, as Lana stepped into the back to wash her hands, Ava stood up, casually walked around, and approached her. "Do you remember all the tables you've served this morning?" she asked, her voice gentle like a curious customer. Lana smiled a bit sheepishly, then pulled out a small notebook from her apron. Its cover was faded, corners curled like they'd absorbed water. Inside each handwritten line was careful and methodical. 7:45, Table 1, 2.7, $5. 8:23, Table 4, $3. 8:59, Table 6, $4.5. System record, Kyle M. On the last page, a red ink line was underlined. Too tall. 423.75. 3 weeks. Lana wasn't angry. She didn't blame anyone. She simply said, I don't have an ID to log into the POS. I'm not recognized in the system, but I write it down to remind myself that I was here, that I worked. Ava gently squeezed the notebook in her hands, not because of the tip amount, but because of the self-respect of someone trying to hold on to her existence within a system that silently erased her name. And in that moment, Ava understood clearly. This wasn't a technical glitch. It was a loophole being exploited, a silence that had been orchestrated, a crack in the philosophy she once built growing deeper. If no one stood up to fill it, silence can speak, if it comes from those still standing tall amid injustice. Ava flipped through each page of the notebook, her fingers pausing over hastily written figures. Some ink was smudged. One line had the faint ring of a coffee cup pressed on it, evidence of mornings when Lana scribbled notes between serving guests. Then she looked up at Lana, the young woman standing in front of her, asking for nothing, expecting nothing, simply wanting to be seen as a real human being. Ava wanted to ask more, but the question caught in her throat. The only thing she could do at that moment was to remain silent with Lana as a quiet form of acknowledgement. Right after that, Ava decided to check the system directly. She pulled out her phone, pretended to place a takeaway order using a fake name. When the transaction was completed, the digital receipt came in once again, showing the name Kyle M. No signs of a technical error. Every transaction was automatically recorded under one account, Kyle's, not by the person serving, but by a manager-defined default setting. And Kyle didn't just accidentally benefit, he knew exactly what was happening. The proof was in how he frequently checked the end-of-shift tip summary, how he was the one who entered the storage room to finalize the numbers even before the manager. And most of all, the way he looked at Lana when she bent down to wipe a table, a look that was both indifferent and laced with the assumption that this is just how it is. Oh, Ava quietly asked another staff member, posing as a regular customer, that cashier guy looks super professional, huh? The young waitress glanced toward Kyle, then softly replied, yes, he doesn't actually serve tables, but he's the one who approves tip IDs. None of us have access to the POS. It was a light answer, but Ava knew it carried enough weight to puncture an entire operational philosophy. The system she once proudly called fair and transparent had been twisted into a gatekeeping mechanism where an employee's worth was no longer tied to their labor, but to whether they were permitted to appear. Right at her table, Ava jotted down 3 lines. Real names don't appear on the system. Real workers have no system access. The person behind the counter controls recognition. She folded the note and tucked it into her wallet, not to report it, but to remind herself, no one builds a decent empire, only for decent people to hide their hunger. And if a name can be erased, then a system can be rewritten. A system cannot call itself fair if it doesn't dare say the names of those who deserve to be seen. The following Monday, 9:01 a.m., New Dawn Cafe, Suburban Branch. No old coat, no knit hat pulled low. Ava Bennett stepped into the cafe in a dark suit, hair neatly pinned. Her eyes scanned each face, moving through their usual rhythms, which, from now on, would no longer be the same. No one had time to react. She walked straight to the counter, pulled out a small USB, plugged it into the POS system without a word. The POS screen switched to internal video mode. Overhead camera angle. Lana, in a worn-out uniform, tray in hand, placed the order at table 6. The customer paid by card, button pressed for confirmation. Name displayed on the POS receipt, Kyle M. No Lana. Not a single line for the girl doing the actual work. Scene change, a recording from the employee break room. A female voice, cold, precise, emotionless. Only those with approved IDs receive tips. No name, no chance. That's how the system works. The cafe felt drained of all sound. Lana, in the middle of pouring water, froze. Her hand tightened around the bottleneck as if to hold on to the weight of something on the verge of collapsing. An older customer placed their fork down. A young couple looked up from breakfast, their expressions shifted from surprise to quiet agreement. Kyle stood still, his brows furrowed. Sienna, the shift manager, stepped out from the back room, just in time to see the footage on the screen. She opened her mouth to speak, but Ava had already begun. Ava's voice steady, every word clear. She served. You logged the name. She greeted the guests. You took the credit. She turned to Sienna. You weren't caught off guard. You were guarding the loophole. Not because you didn't know, but because you chose to. Ava gave a small nod. HR staff from headquarters entered as prearranged. Kyle Marshall immediately terminated. Sienna Clark temporarily suspended, pending full investigation of her shift history. No applause, no objections. The cafe held only one thing, a solemn silence, as if everyone knew this should have happened long ago. Ava returned to the POS terminal. She plugged in a small device. The screen lit up, displaying in bold letters, "Tip system active, real server linked vertical bar, public view vertical bar verified." Then she turned to address the entire staff. No more default IDs. No more approved names. From now on, those who work will be the ones whose names appear. Morning sunlight filtered through the fog glass, casting a beam onto the message like a seal of undeniable truth. And Ava, who had long stepped back to manage from behind the scenes, now stood at the center of the counter, right where the truth needed someone to call it back by name. Fairness should not depend on privilege. It must live in how we operate daily without needing supervision. The moment the words "tip system active" appeared, the atmosphere in the cafe shifted quieter but heavier. The coffee grinder stopped. Soft laughter from regulars in the corner faded. Everyone was listening. Ava didn't leave the counter. She stepped back, making room for Lana. "Come here," she said softly, yet clearly enough for the entire cafe to hear. "Why don't you be the one to register yourself into the system?" Lana froze, still holding a tray of water, yet to be delivered. A brief pause then, she placed the tray down and stepped forward toward the screen. Ava handed her a new employee badge at surface, gleaming, printed with a clear name. La Nguyen, server. A unique ID, one that no one could ever replace again. "Swipe it," Ava nodded. Lana scanned the card. A confirmation line appeared. "Employee verified Lana N. Vertical bar, tip attribution activated." The entire cafe exhaled in unison, as if finally released from a silence that had lasted for weeks. Ava turned to the nearest table, table 4. An older woman smiled and gently placed an extra $5 bill on the edge of her plate. For the girl who actually did the work and didn't wait to be called by name. Another young employee, Andre, stepped forward. "Do you have a card for me too?" he asked, his voice unable to hide the emotion. Ava handed him another badge. Then she looked around. No more directors, no more CEOs, only a woman rebuilding a system from the place where it had once cracked. Behind the counter, Kyle walked out without a word. Sienna stood still, eyes lowered, then quietly stepped into the office as if she understood. Power no longer rested in an ID, but in the trust they had lost. The door of New Dawn Cafe swung open not to welcome new customers, but to let a truly new morning begin. And in that moment, Ava knew. A system only stays just when the one running it dares to speak the names of those who were once silenced. Fairness does not appear by itself. It must be designed and defended every day. 1 month later, the exterior of the suburban New Dawn Cafe branch hadn't changed much. Still the gentle morning lights, still the aroma of coffee floating through the air. But what truly changed was how everyone was seen. Just behind the counter, the new POS system ran smoothly. Every receipt clearly displayed the real name of the person who served. Every tip transaction was updated live on a public screen. No more approved IDs. No more handwritten notes to prove existence. Lana no longer wore a server's apron. She stood in the middle of an internal training room, a whiteboard behind her, holding her old notebook now wrapped in leather. The edge carefully labeled, "Document the right things once forgotten." She lectured the new staff not with theory, but with lived experience. Opening to the last page, the red ink still there. Total, 423.75. 3 weeks. System record, Kyle M. "This isn't just the amount I lost," Lana said. "It's the time I lived in silence, just to prove I was even there." A moment of silence followed not from shock, but from empathy. Then she added softly, "Doing the right thing doesn't guarantee you'll be seen. But if we all hold on to what's right, no system can ignore us forever." A quiet morning again. The table by the window where Ava once sat watching that first morning shift now held just a plate of pancakes, a cup of black coffee, and a folded $20 bill beneath a handwritten note. "Thank you for holding on to what's right, even when it meant going hungry." Lana found it after the training session. She didn't cry. But when she placed the note in the middle of her notebook right on the page with the red ink, her hand trembled slightly. Not out of anger or sadness, but because she knew someone had seen, had understood, and had corrected what should never have gone wrong in the first place. A fair system isn't just built on rules. It's built by people who don't give up even when their names are left out. Months later, the New Dawn Cafe headquarters began noticing something unexpected. Applications surged, not because of higher pay, but because the story of the server who was once forgotten had quietly spread across service industry HR groups. On the company's internal network, a new section was launched. Voice from the Floor, a space where staff from every branch could directly share experiences and feedback without going through a manager. Lana was the first to submit. Just one line. If I hadn't written down every table that day, would anyone have known I was ever there? The post was shared nearly 400 times within 3 days. In the new training curriculum, Ava added a mandatory session. A fair system starts with the right name. Lana taught the class. Beside her still the old notebook and the handwritten note. But this time, she didn't just teach how to document, she taught how to stand up and hold on to what's right, with a silence that could echo. During a board meeting, Ava formally proposed archiving Lana's notebook in the Internal Heritage Library of New Dawn Cafe, naming it The Notebook of the Forgotten Name and the Lesson the Whole System Must Remember. The entire board unanimously agreed. Lana's story didn't stop at one fix. It became a principle. Because a system is only truly strong when it knows how to pause, listen, and has the courage to rewrite itself. And people like Ava, like Lana, they don't create miracles. They simply do one thing, simple but right. They name the truth, so that no one else has to stand in the shadows for doing the right thing.